Okay, well, welcome to One and All. We are picking up with Matthew 18, verse 7. And I just want to remind you, because I have to remind myself, this temptations to sin, this heading isn't here. Jesus just kept going. He was just teaching. And editors later put those headings in. And they're there for good reason. So it's easy to find things. If you go look in an older Bible, like an old King James that didn't have those, and you're in a great big long chapter, it's a challenge. It's a challenge to find things. But Jesus has been talking about little ones. And we see here, but whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a great millstone fastened around his neck and to be drowned in the depth of the sea. Now, there's this interesting thing because he keeps on. He's got basically the same subject that he's talking about, these little ones. And little ones, he's talking about a child, a young child from the Greek word that's used. But what we have to go to is this. He said up here, right here, and this is from the lesson last week, truly I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. So with that in mind, we come to an understanding that in faith, we are all little ones. And definitely, Jesus is talking to the disciples here. It's definitely for those who are under the care of the overseers. There is a hierarchy as far as responsibility goes. And with responsibility, I want to be a leader. I want to be a teacher. I want to be a pastor. It's responsibility carries with it accountability. You have to answer for what you do, and you do it in his name when you're teaching his word. So when you are teaching, when you are instructing, when you are a parent, a Christian parent to your child, when you are helping those who are not as far along in the faith as you might be, okay, and we all find ourselves in those situations, this attitude that Jesus has, this perspective that he gives about these little ones and how dear and precious they are to him, it needs to be our attitude. And that's what he's going to continue with. It's talking about little ones, and yeah, that's little kids, but it's also those who are new to the faith, those who are still growing in the faith, and we're all still growing in the faith, but it's broader than just little children who were sitting on his lap. Woe to the world for temptations to sin, for it is necessary that temptations come, but woe to the one by whom the temptation comes. Now, we've had this word temptation come up before, and it's translated a lot of different ways, but the translation temptation, it limps. It doesn't really get the job done. Everyone out there, every English-speaking person knows the word scandal. Scandal. Oh, it's a scandal. There's nothing good about a scandal. Only bad things come from a scandal. Well, that word scandal comes from this word right here in the Greek, and it's over here on the right if you want to see it. And there's this thing I can do that I always forget about. I can hit this, and then now probably won't let me do it. Yeah, it's not going to let me do the draw on the text thing. The word scandalon is the Greek. Scandalon. And what that word signified, it's the stick in a trap that both holds the bait and itself activates the trap. Okay, so the Bible scholar Linsky uses the word entrapments, And that's a good picture. But there are just things, and if you're bilingual, and many of you out there may be, if you've learned another language and learned it well, you know that there are things that are just hard to translate. You have to use a lot of words to get the picture that the one word in the other language uses. And scandalon is definitely that. It is the thing that entices and springs the trap. That's what is being said when Jesus is here talking about, in this translation, temptations. Woe to the world for entrapments into sin, things that trap people in sin, for it is necessary. And it's pick on the translation night, I guess, but not really. Inevitable is better. Inevitable, necessary and inevitable. And think about those two words, kind of bounce them around in your head. And they both, they're related. But there's a different significance with necessary as opposed to inevitable. It's inevitable. In this world, you will have trouble. Take heart, I've overcome the world. John 16:33. In this world, it is inevitable that temptations, entrapments into sin will come. Why? Because it's a sinful world. Why? Because a vast portion of humanity is living in rebellion against God. And those who, and just think about that word, we throw that phrase out there, rebellion against God. Rebellion against God. Well, rebellion is an active thing. It's not just a state of being. Okay? It is warring against, fighting against. And what do sinners like to do? When, just think of kids getting in trouble. What is the kid who's causing the trouble, who's instigating the trouble? What does that kid try to do? You try to get others to join in, right? You're actively leading other people into trouble. And that's what happens with sin. So it is inevitable that entrapments into sin, that temptations come, but woe to the one by whom the temptation comes. And that word woe is almost always used in the concept of judgment. Judgment. That's really bad. Woe. Woe. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees. We're going to get to that once we get into the latter portions of Matthew here, when Jesus is railing against the scribes and the Pharisees. And he says, woe to you. Woe bespeaks judgment. There's judgment coming for that. Judgment results from that. So woe, judgment's coming. Judgment is the result of this. Woe to the one by whom the entrapment comes.
What's the word in Hebrew for woe?
It's Greek, and it's oi.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. This is it right here. And it literally, and it even sounds bad in the Greek, ui, 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 ui. And that's to the world, cosmo, cosmology and the cosmos. But woe to the one by whom the temptation, woe to the one by whom the temptation comes. Woe. It's a really, really bad thing. And there is a theme that is developed here, and that is the severity of the consequences of sin. Because we are sinners, because we wrestle with sin, we are often inclined to sell short judgment. We look at judgment as it is described, and we're going to look at some passages here in a moment, but we look at judgment, God's judgment, which is just, which is right, which is fair, and eternal, and we think it harsh. You know why that is? I am inclined to think of the judgment, the eternal judgment, damnation, lake of fire stuff of sin, and think it harsh, because I also look at my own sin and think of it as not all that bad. When I really own up to and come to understand and rightly view my own sin, its severity, that it is what it is rebellion against God. When I really own up to that for myself, then this weird thing happens. The severity of the judgment on the last day doesn't seem quite so severe, because I know that's what I deserve, but I'm redeemed. I'm forgiven, right? When I appreciate and rightly estimate the damnable nature of my own sin, then I rightly appreciate the sacrifice my Lord made on the cross. And I say, oh, who am I that for my sake, my Lord should take frail flesh and die? That from the hymn, My Song is Love Unknown. So whenever I think there's something in the scriptures that's out of line, maybe a little bit, I kind of have a hard time getting my mind around that. Yeah, your mind's the problem, not God's word. My mind, the way I think about things, is what needs to be adjusted. God, help me to view this aright. Help me to understand. Help me see the depravity of my own sin, so that I appreciate all the more the grace and forgiveness and mercy that you shower upon me. And when I struggle with that sin anew, I run to you for help and guidance and strength in that day of trouble. Okay, so very important. Don't sell short how bad sin is. And it's going to be judged. And that is a fearful thing. How severe is it? How badly should I desire to escape it? Jesus is going to use an example, and this right here in verses 8 and 9 is almost a repeat of what he said back in Matthew 5, 29 and 30 in the Sermon on the Mount. And if your hand or foot causes you to sin, notice it's highlighted. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. And if your hand or foot causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life crippled or lame than with 2 hands or 2 feet to be thrown into the eternal fire. And if your eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life with 1 eye than with 2 eyes to be thrown into the hell of fire. Now, guess what? I had the pink there for the temptation up there. Well, guess what this is? This, we said, was this word over here, scandalon. It is a noun. This is the verbal form of the same root. It is scandalizo. Scandalizo, the thing that is the verbal action of that. And here, and if your hand or foot entraps you in sin, think of meat on a stick that when the bear grabs it, the trap gets him. If your hand or your foot entraps you in sin, cut it off and throw it away. First of all, this is hyperbole, and it is absurdity for the sake of illustration. And we all do that. We all do that. Oh, if you can't control your hand, it's going to steal that stuff. It's going to touch those things it shouldn't touch. Your foot's going to carry you away to go do whatever. If you want to use that as your excuse, if that limb, that body part has that power over you, then you better be rid of the body part. Throw it away. Why? Because it's better to lose your hand or your foot than to go into the eternal fire of hell. And how is that eternal fire pictured? Well, got a few references here. In Matthew 25:41, Jesus says, then he will say to those on his left, this is Matthew 25, 30 through 45 is the separating, or maybe 31, is the separating of the sheep from the goats. The right hand, the left hand. Go away from me, I never knew you. Then he will say to those on the left, depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. That's pretty severe. It's pretty severe. You have chosen to rebel against God. You have chosen to war against him. And when he decrees that war over, you get what you fought for. You don't have to have anything to do with him again. And that is pictured, and it's not just a metaphor, it's not just a picture, but it is shown as fire. Why? If you told me, here's a list of 5 ways that you're going to die, you get to pick which 3 you're going to exclude. And if fire is on there, guess what one I'm picking first? That. Because the idea of burning is a terrible thing to us. It is probably the most fearful thing to us, but it is the judgment that awaits here in Revelation 14:10. And this is, we're into the mark of the beast and all that stuff. And those who choose the mark of the beast, who accept the mark of the beast. And it does have to be something that you do. You worship the beast and its image and receive a mark on his forehead and hand. That person who chooses damnation in that way, he also will drink the wine of God's wrath poured full strength into the cup of his anger. And he will be tormented with fire and sulfur in the presence of the holy angels, in the presence of the Lamb. Tormented with fire and sulfur. And you've probably never smelled sulfur burn. It really stinks. Then, Revelation 20, verse 15. And if anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, there's the book of life. And praise God that through faith, your name is in it. That is the single most important moment in your life, when that book gets flipped open and it said, yep, she's with me, he's with me. But for those whose name is not there, and if anyone's name was not found in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire, a lake of fire. Kind of scary and awful on steroids. And then chapter 21, verse 8, and this is right after that section of Revelation that's so familiar to us about God wiping every tear from our eyes. And there will be no more sorrow or suffering or pain or death, for the old order of things has passed away. But in verse 8, but as for the cowardly, the faithless, the detestable, as for murderers, the sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars, their portion will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death. Come on, take me back to my place. There we go. So these things, they can't cause us to sin. That's the picture. Sin is a willful act on our own part. But if it is that there's something, the judgment that we receive for sin, that we would receive for sin, that some will receive for sin, is so terrible and unthinkable that if we were to receive that, if the option was either lose a limb or lose your eye, and that's the one most abhorrent here, right? If your eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. That's just an awful, awful, graphic picture. But it serves a point. It serves a point. Judgment is that bad. The consequences of sin are that bad. It is better for you to enter life with one eye than with two eyes to be thrown into the hell of fire. And it's interesting, this term hell is Gehenna. Gehenna. And Gehenna was, and it was a physical place. It was the Valley of Hinnom, right outside of Jerusalem. And that's where some of the kings had sacrificed their sons to Molech, and people in Jerusalem had sacrificed their kids to Molech. And in Jeremiah, a curse is put on it. It was used because nobody was going to live there. It was cursed. And it was this place where these horrible, abominable, damnable activities had gone on that resulted in the fall of Jerusalem. There were a big part in that. It was that was about as bad as it got in the southern kingdom there. But because nobody wanted to live there, it was the dump. It was the dump. Now, when you think of a dump, many of you, I'll talk to the older crowd. If you've got some of this on your face or in your hair, remember the dump outside of town where you grew up. Now the dump is waste management. It's like an industrial operation, right? Different thing altogether from what the town dump was outside of my hometown. You would go there, you could just take stuff and dump it. That's where the garbage stuff's trucks just took stuff and dumped it, and it stunk. And oftentimes it was burning. There was a fire in part of it. It was a place to go shoot your air guns or your 22s. There were bottles to break and other stuff, but it was a really nasty, lousy place. This place, Gehenna, outside of Jerusalem, in one of the valleys, there was a dump, and it was almost always on fire because they burn the stuff up, right? Because if you don't burn the stuff up, you can't put more stuff there. And dead animals, dogs, whatever else could be thrown in there as well. It was a horrible visual of a place forsaken by God, and it actually had been forsaken by God. So the term Gehenna came to be synonymous with hell. And it was a picture everyone could understand. So it's the hell of fire. It's always burning. It stinks. It's unpleasant. Nobody wants to be there. Nobody wants to call it home. So this is an instance where Jesus is using a picture from everyday life that they all understood to make a point. And it had come to be used in common parlance as another word for hell. And specifically, they had different ideas about hell and exactly how it worked. There was the underworld where the dead went, right? And then there was the hell, the underworld, that was final judgment. And Gehenna was viewed as that place. That was the concept that it was used to describe. Gehenna was that second judgment, the second death, if you will. Okay. Well, I think we're a few minutes early, but we're going to stop there because we definitely do not have time to cover the entirety of the parable of the lost sheep. But big takeaway from the lesson today is rightly valuing. That's you can put a negative value on things. Rightly understanding the severity of sin and the justice of God, that sin is punished, and it is punished eternally. And how did we get here? He was talking about the little ones and consequences for those who cause those little ones, those who were vulnerable in the faith, to be entrapped in whatever sinful devices. And we didn't spend time talking about that, and we should have, and we've got a few moments, so we will. One of the most important things that we can understand about sin is this: it appeals to me because I like it. Now, as a believer, saying that should make me shake my head like, what? What do you mean I like it? No, but we do. We do. Sin appeals to us. Now, I want to, through my walk of faith, through my growth in the grace and truth and knowledge of Jesus Christ, I want to get to the place where it doesn't have as much power over me anymore. But it's only that it doesn't have power because the new man of faith has grown and is strong and can smack it down and say, no, old man of sin, you're staying over there. But the old man of sin who is with me until the day I die, and Paul talks about the old man and the new man in Ephesians especially, that old man of sin, it likes sin. It likes sin. It likes anger. It likes lust. It likes rebellion. All of those things are there, and they're there within me. And part of the warning here is it's a horrible thing if that sinfulness of my own also entraps someone else. Part of the responsibility of those who are more mature in the faith, and I won't just say pastors and teachers or whatever else, is that your actions have impact and influence on other people. You will recall that I have said about our faith and our walk of faith and encouraging one another, as we just saw recently in 1 Thessalonians, that I will state readily that our faith isn't just about us. My faith isn't just about me, right? It has an impact on other people, a positive impact. I can build them up. I can encourage. I can comfort, all of those things. The same thing is true for my sin. With one lapse in judgment, I can cause other spiritual problems and peril. And the more mature you are in the faith, the more others look up to you as an example, as someone to follow, then the greater the damage that my sin can do. And that's part of what Jesus is talking about here with woe to the world for temptations to sin, for it is necessary that temptations come, but woe to the one by whom the temptation comes. We need to pray to God that that isn't us, that part of why I want to make sure that my walk of faith is consistent and steady and strong is because a lapse on my part isn't just a lapse on my part. It's not. I'm part of a community. I've got others whose lives are interlocked with mine. So we'll end with that. I want to thank you for being here. We're going to keep plugging away through the Gospel of Matthew. We've made it through 18 chapters so far. We still got a ways to go. Some of those latter chapters get very long, but that's a good thing. It's all good stuff. Want to thank you for joining us. Please smash that like button. Give us a thumbs up. It makes a difference. Encourage you, if you have not, to subscribe. And if you subscribe, make sure and hit that notification bell so you're made aware when we put out new content. And finally, well, not finally, but next, I encourage you to share this video with others. And finally, go to our website, www.decodingthedeception.com, and you can find all of our Bible teachings and all of our other videos, as well as multiple resources. Thank you. God bless, and have a great day.